Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this one. A distressing scene of an Italian tourist hunter, accompanied by two African pygmies he had hired, displaying a gorilla hanging on a pole that they had captured in the Belgian Congo, a territory administered by the Kingdom of Belgium in Africa in the year 1930. An American woman wearing a conical, pointy cone bra, popularly nicknamed the bullet bra. Invented in the late 1940s, they became quite popular in the 1950s. A manta ray weighing over 2 tons was captured. The giant ray got caught on Captain Khan's boat anchor while he was fishing off the coast of New Jersey, United States in the 1930s. An American woman poses for a photograph while washing an alligator on an alligator farm in Los Angeles, United States in 1949. An Arab man with his 3 wives and 2 servants in Egypt in 1870. A man with a punt gun, a type of extremely large shotgun used for hunting ducks. It could kill over 50 birds at once and was banned in the late 1960s. A group of women competing in a pig race on a California beach, United States during the 1950s. Elvis Presley riding through Memphis, Tennessee on a Harley on June 30, 1972. English car enthusiasts in extravagant outfits for a car show in Liverpool in 1907. Since the early cars had no roofs or doors and were driven mainly on dirt roads, drivers needed clothes that could protect them from wind, cold, and dust. The passenger ocean liner Titanic in Southampton, England, shortly before departing on its maiden voyage to New York on April 10, 1912. People around a car accident in Washington, USA in 1921. American girls in a raspberry pie eating competition without using their hands in the USA in the 1930s. Food contests were popular in the early 20th century. Two American soldiers try to comfort a little French girl with her puppy after the Allied invasion on the French coast of Normandy during World War II in 1944. A woman in a litter, a type of human-powered vehicle, with a somewhat snobbish and unpleasant expression, while the barefoot slaves have a sad and downcast look. This photo was taken in Bahia in 1860. Photograph of the beauty pageant of the first Miss Soviet Union in 1988. Three friends on a car ride in the state of Ohio, in the Midwest of the USA in the 1920s. In 1912, Jim Thorpe, a Native American, had his running shoes stolen on the morning of his Olympic track events. He found this mismatched pair of shoes in the trash and ran with them to win 2 Olympic gold medals that day. He was also the first Native American to win a gold medal for the United States. A world record of a bass fish weighing nearly 200 kilos, caught by Franklin Schenck with a reel rod in California on August 17, 1900. The German aircraft designer Max Wiedenhöft, perched on the roof of an airplane hangar, tries to fly in a rocket-powered flying bicycle equipped with wings in Germany around 1900. The British airship R-33 in its hangar as it prepares for its first flight at an airfield in North Yorkshire, England in 1919. An American woman dressed in a barrel with the words, "I did my part, did you?" written on it in Times Square, New York City, in 1945. She was part of a campaign to collect clothes to help with World War II relief in Europe. A young woman hugged and kissed a uniformed U.S. soldier after the end of World War II at a train station in Pennsylvania in 1945. A Nigerian man wearing a traditional mask of a local tribe in Nigeria in 1946. The American horror show and film actor Johnny Eck, who was born with an underdeveloped torso, poses for a promotional photo for the famous 1932 film Freaks. A shepherd leading his sheep in London in 1929. A native of Papua New Guinea guiding a wounded Australian soldier to his base during the Battle of Bunagona, allies against the Japanese in the Pacific in World War II in 1942. People in an alley in Manhattan, New York, Mulberry Street, better known as Bandits' Roost, for being a very dangerous area, symbolizing the worst of New York's slums in 1888. An American World War II veteran observing the Golden Gate Bridge with his son, California, United States in 1959. The German engineer Wernher von Braun, posing for a photo in front of the rocket engines he helped develop in the USA in 1969. Von Braun was the head of rocket development in the German industry during World War II, a member of the SS, and an early enthusiast of the Nazi Party. His V-2 missiles took the lives of thousands of people, both on the battlefield and in the concentration camps where they were manufactured. A Burmese tourist family receiving instructions from a policeman in London in 1935. A young Estonian farmer poses next to his own creation, a wooden bicycle that he built in 1912. The French actress Brigitte Bardot, at 19 years old, enjoying the sun on a beach in the French city of Cannes in 1953. A lady with a spinning wheel in Ireland in 1890. A spinning wheel is a device for spinning threads or fibers and was crucial to the cotton textile industry before the Industrial Revolution. The American pianist and composer Harry Carroll with a group of girls from his choir at his beach house in Santa Monica, California in 1929. A telepath attempting to hypnotize a chimpanzee in 1941. Gold washing by slaves on a farm in 1880. Criminals held in special devices in China in 1890. This device, widely used as a form of punishment in various East Asian nations, consisted of boards hung around the offender's neck, with size and weight varying according to the severity of the crime. The American engineer John Walter in the car he invented and built himself. John gained fame by inventing and building his own car in 1907. His notoriety grew even more when his geared steering system, later used in tanks and armored vehicles during World War II, became a milestone in the automotive and military industries. The head of Christ the Redeemer on the ground at a site in São Gonçalo, waiting to be transported to form the statue, Rio de Janeiro, in 1931. American bathers being escorted by police off a beach in Chicago in 1922. The women in this photo are being arrested for exposing their legs in one-piece bathing suits which was prohibited by ordinances in many U.S. communities in the 1920s. The Italian inventor Davide Cislaghi, testing his one-wheel motorcycle in France in 1933. A crowd watches a boxing match at Campo de Sant'Anna, Rio de Janeiro in the 1930s. A couple from the rustic rural life in Victorian England in 1857. The British model Jenny Clare, posing for a photo with her Austin minicar in London in the 1970s. A photograph taken in 1920 of a young French girl looking pensive on a beach in France, surrounded by people on deck chairs. The Polish-born French physicist and chemist Marie Curie in her laboratory in Paris in 1910. She was the first woman to win the Nobel Prize, also the first person and the only woman to win it twice, and the only person to be awarded in 2 different scientific fields. George and Fred, the world's funniest boxers. Known as the Living Skeleton and the Fat Man, George and Fred were 2 circus performers in the USA in 1890. A dog trainer reads a message brought by a messenger dog that had just swum across a canal in France during World War I in 1915. The self-taught sports aeronaut and Brazilian inventor Alberto Santos Dumont, in the center with a flower on his chest, with people posing for a photo with one of his balloons in the background, around 1898. American girls in swimsuits enjoying the beach in Arlington County, metropolitan area of Washington in 1925. A young girl posing for a photo holding her chicken, around 1900. Citizens of the city of Bruges, Belgium, await the appearance of the Virgin Mary on a viaduct not far from the Christian school where children supposedly saw her the day before, in 1933. A boxing match aboard a U.S. Navy warship in July 1899. Men gather in front of a store to listen to jazz music on a radio in New York City in the 1940s. The discovery of an ancient Mayan statue in the depths of the jungles of Honduras in 1885. A farmer with his family in the Ozark Mountains area, Arkansas, USA, in October 1935. The British comedian Charles Spencer Chaplin, better known by his stage name Charlie Chaplin, in a scene from the 1918 silent film A Dog's Life. Chaplin was one of the greatest actors of the silent film era, noted for his use of mime and slapstick comedy. Two Belgian girls selling milk with a dog-drawn cart in Brussels, Belgium in the 19th century. A worker with a knife sharpener in 1899. A shellfish vendor with a cart and customers lined up on a street in New York City in 1900. An Italian shepherd woman with her flock in the abandoned park of Palazzo Orsini in Bomarzo, Italy in the 1950s. One of the last cowboys of the Old West sitting next to his horse on a hill, watching other horses grazing in the American state of Texas around 1910. An indigenous man from the Ohafia tribe wearing a mask for traditional religious practices in West Africa in 1931. The Spanish painter Pablo Picasso talking with a young woman on a French beach in the 1960s. A doctor gave an injection of fluids taken from a live hair to a German girl, which, along with ultraviolet radiation and gymnastics, was believed to lead to rejuvenation in Berlin in 1925. American girls in the 1940s enjoying the beaches of California on a happy day. New York in 1907. A man prepared for a dive in an iron suit. The suit, electric charging and pressure protection systems. American girls cooled off with buckets of water in the strong summer heat in New York in the 1940s. Hysterical fans are restrained by the police during a Beatles concert in 1964. The winner of a beauty pageant in Brighton, southern England in the 1920s. English girls in swimsuits in England in the 1960s. A Mexican demonstrates a tactical trick of the soldiers for a photo during the Mexican Revolution in 1913. An erotic photograph from a French studio run by the brothers Jacques Biederer and Charles Biederer during a photo shoot in Paris in 1928. The Hungarian engineer Stefan nailed near the machine he invented, which supposedly made people and inanimate objects invisible in 1935. Chester McDuffie, with his armored diving suit in New York. Chester built the first underwater armor with ball bearings and set a new American deep-sea diving record by descending to a depth of 212 feet in 1914. An immigrant family in the USA, after having just passed the strict entry examination, looking hopefully at the New York skyline while awaiting the government ferry on August 13, 1925. Mexican revolutionaries in Tampico, Mexico, January 1911. The Mexican Revolution was an armed movement against the dictatorship of the President of Mexico, Porfirio Diaz, and in favor of a popular and reformist government to end social inequalities. Officials evaluating American girls, contestants in a beauty pageant at a seaside park, New York in the 1930s. A 70-year-old English lady, believed to be the only female blacksmith in England at the time, shoeing a horse outside a forge with her husband in the 1930s. British bathers waiting for their turn to ride the slide at a beach in England in 1927. The young British actress Madeline Smith, who frequently acted in horror and comedy films at the time, in May 1971. An Italian monk wearing a funerary mask in 1892. Some Indian cavalry soldiers preparing a meal in Estrée-Blanche, France during World War I in 1915. A wounded British soldier taking bandages from a Red Cross dog during World War I in 1915. A couple with their BMW Isetta microcar in the 1950s. The BMW Isetta was one of the microcars produced in the years following World War II. The Brazilian aviation pioneer, Alberto Santos Dumont, transporting his monoplane by car in France around 1909. A hip massage machine in the United States around 1928. A sea elephant with its handler at a zoo in Paris in 1936. Two soldiers reading their correspondence in trenches on the Italian front during World War II. Italy, December 11, 1944. British soldiers blinded by poison gas in World War I lined up heading to a dressing station. April 1918. A train on the New York Central Railroad, November 1936. A policeman interacting with a little girl who was trying to cross a street during a parade in Washington in 1950. The participants of a beauty pageant at the National Tobacco Festival undress in a large oak barrel in the southern city of Boston, United States in the 1930s. Three Soviet women guerrillas in action in Russia during World War II in 1942. Acrobats balancing on top of the Empire State Building in 1934. Father in Santa Claus suit with his daughters in 1900. Two men pose for a photo next to a Coca-Cola delivery truck in 1910. A state militia fighter confronts an African-American war veteran during mass racial clashes in Chicago, United States, 1919. An American tenant farmer moving his household goods to a new farm during the greatest financial crisis in the United States in the 1930s. A shellfish vendor on a street in London, England in 1877. A man with the first steam engine invented by the English engineer George Stephenson at the railway in Manchester, England in 1910. A New York City policeman stops to allow a mother cat to safely cross the street while carrying her kitten in 1925. Sophia Loren watching Jane Mansfield during a 20th Century Fox party on April 12, 1957.
A clock found in the city of Hiroshima in Japan, which stopped at 8:15 a.m. It went through the first nuclear bombing in history. The minute hand is partially melted or vaporized, which is why it looks shorter. The atomic bomb was designed by American physicist Oppenheimer, who said, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The quote is from a Hindu sacred text. A terrifying shadow of the tragic bombing of Hiroshima on the fateful day of August 6, 1945, when the atomic bomb devastated Hiroshima, Japan. The explosion instantly reduced so many lives to ashes that an accurate count of the victims became impossible. The explosion's radiation left marks on the surfaces where people were vaporized. Coal miners in Belgium crowding into an elevator after an exhausting day of work around the year 1900. A photo of the terrible Hindenburg disaster, which occurred on May 6, 1937. This incident involved the LZ-129 Hindenburg, a German airship, which caught fire and was destroyed during its attempt to land in Lakehurst, New Jersey. The disaster was one of the deadliest in aviation history up to that date and marked the end of the airship era as a popular means of transatlantic transportation. 35 people on board the airship and one ground worker were killed when the Hindenburg caught fire, and was destroyed during its landing attempt. A woman in a strange contraption to remove freckles in Hungary in 1937. The device was used to keep the patient still and protect the eyes from the substance applied to the face. A mother crossing a river with her children to escape a U.S. bombing of her village during the Vietnam War in 1965. An American photographer posing with two extra tall men, known as the Giants of Kashmir, in 1903. Kashmir is a region in the northern Indian subcontinent. Photo of a German prisoner of war returning to his hometown in Germany after the end of World War II, only to discover that his home has been bombed and his family is no longer there. In 1946, May 5th, 1945, a photo with some of the thousands of wedding rings that German soldiers removed from Holocaust victims to save the gold. British soldiers, after being temporarily blinded by a German gas attack during World War I, advanced towards an advanced medical post in France, April 1918. A river pirate, responsible for taking the lives of at least 6 people, including the act of gouging out the victim's eyes, awaits his time in China in 1900. He is depicted standing on stones or wooden beams. Each day, one of them will be removed, gradually reducing the support under his feet. Eventually, he will have nothing left to stand on. 6 robust Mongolian men, dressed in traditional wrestling attire in Inner Mongolia, China, in 1909. The Mongols, as a group of nomadic people, have played a significant role in China's cultural and political life over the centuries. A 22-year-old woman serving in the United States Air Force in 1943. During 1942, at the height of World War II, the United States faced a serious shortage of pilots. In response to this shortage, an experimental program was implemented to replace male pilots with women. Captured Chinese communist troops, in a moment of desperation, appeal for clemency from a South Korean soldier, fearing for their fate during the Korean War in 1951. A group of women skaters posing together for a photo in England in 1926. A worker operating a knife and scissor sharpening machine, representing one of the lost and long-forgotten professions, on the streets of Berlin, the capital of Germany, in 1904. A group of Texas cowboys taking a break for lunch around a wagon during a cattle roundup in 1900. They are preparing food on makeshift campfires, a typical scene of fieldwork during long cattle drives through open landscapes. The wagon, likely a chuck wagon, was essential on these journeys, transporting food and supplies. Soviet soldiers harass a German woman after the end of World War II in Europe. Unfortunately, acts of cruelty against women occurred on a large scale in occupied German territory during and after the war. It is important to note that such acts were not perpetrated exclusively by Soviet troops, but also by other Allied forces, as reported by historians. Hungarian Jews being cruelly selected by German soldiers to be transported to the gas chamber at the tragic Auschwitz concentration camp during the grim year of 1944. November 1918. A Canadian soldier tries to comfort a Belgian baby who was injured and whose mother was killed by an artillery shell in World War I. An ice cream vendor watches as a boy gives a spoonful of ice cream to his sister in Constantinople, Ottoman Empire in 1898. Ice cream originated in China and is about 4,000 years old. Initially, it was more like a slushie without milk, made with snow, fruit juice, and honey. A poignant and distressing moment during World War II is depicted in this image of SS soldiers with Hungarian Jews at the Auschwitz concentration camp. In the photograph, a child is seen holding a flower found in the grass and offering it to an older boy. Tragically, all the individuals present in this image were victims of lethal gas just moments after this tender moment. A Serbian soldier during World War I sleeps next to his father, who came to visit him on the front line around 1914. A group of Americans parading with Nazi uniforms and flags in New Jersey, USA on July 18, 1937. Comprising nearly 1,000 men, this march was organized by the German-American Bund, which promoted German Nazi culture and ideals in America before World War II. This event is a striking example of how extremist ideologies can spread and find support, even in countries with strong democratic traditions. Despite being shocking, this support was minor and short-lived, ending when the USA entered the war. The Canadian physical education teacher and inventor of basketball, James Naismith, playing a game of basketball with his wife at the end of the 19th century, U.S. Lieutenant Colonel Robert returning home, is greeted by his family after more than 5 years as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam on March 17, 1973. Although the photograph might symbolize the comforting concept that the family could heal after the war, this was far from true for the lieutenant. A few days before he was rescued and brought home, his wife wrote him a letter. She had fallen in love with someone else and wanted a divorce. A railway signalman who lost both legs in an accident, working alongside his pet and assistant, a baboon named Jack, southwest coast of South Africa in 1880. A group of people posing for a photo in front of a large fallen giant sequoia tree, over 1,300 years old in the state of California in 1892. Giant sequoias are majestic and impressive trees, which can reach heights of up to 95 meters and trunk diameters of up to 17 meters. They are native to the western United States. These incredible trees have a long history, with some of them being over 3,000 years old. They are so ancient that many of the trees seen by early European explorers are still alive today. A rare photograph of the indigenous Sami people of northern Europe around a hut in northern Sweden around 1880. The Sami are an indigenous ethnic group inhabiting vast areas of Norway, Sweden, northern Finland, and the Kola Peninsula in Russia. An automobile race held at the Gavea Circuit in Rio de Janeiro. The circuit was considered so dangerous that it was nicknamed the Devil's Springboard. In the image, we see the starting moment on Marquês de São Vicente Street. The race was won by Italian Vittorio Coppoli car number 12, indicated in the photograph, Brazil, on June 7, 1936. A blind child in Chicago, United States, sits on the back of a kneeling circus elephant in April 1917. A woman being arrested in the United States for wearing a swimsuit considered too short for the time on the beach during the 1920s. 6-year-old Ruby Bridges, followed by federal agents on her first day of school at an all-white elementary school in the deep south of the United States, a region that insisted on not respecting the law ending racial segregation in 1960. Milk vendors with a cart pulled by a dog through the streets of Brussels, the capital of Belgium, around 1890. A New York policeman suspended without a safety net on a building in Times Square, United States, in the year 1920. A woman accompanied by 2 small girls sadly contemplates her ruined home in the devastating World War II landscape. Soviet Union on September 1, 1943. French neurologist Guillaume Duchenne, often referred to as the father of electrotherapy, conducts a series of innovative experiments on muscle and nerve reactions to small electrical impulses in a patient in the year 1862. An elderly gypsy woman next to a German officer and the Nazi psychologist Dr. Robert Ritter in 1938. With the Nazis' rise to power in Germany in 1933, a distorted ideology of racial purity prevailed, considering the Aryan race superior and seeking to purify German society of groups considered racially or genetically inferior. A miner enjoys his meal while his wife watches him attentively in Great Britain in 1937. The mining profession dates back centuries, but gained even more importance during the Industrial Revolution, when coal began to be burned on a large scale to power stationary engines, locomotives, and heat buildings. A little girl accompanied by her faithful dog in front of a store with a sign that says, "No dog biscuits today." The scene took farmers driving their flocks of turkeys through the streets of Cuero in the U.S. state of Texas on Thanksgiving Day in 1913. With the arrival of a processing plant near the town in 1908, turkey farmers began to guide their flocks through the town center toward the plant. A mother carrying her child on her back and food on her head in Salvador the capital of the state of Bahia in 1884. A woman drinking water from a common glass attached to a water pump in Chicago, United States in 1899. A merchant pulling a cart loaded with brooms, dusters, and handmade wooden utensils, representing everyday life in Japan around 1890. In the image, dated around 1905, we see loggers accompanied by pack horses transporting a massive giant fir log from the dense forests of the U.S. state of Washington. Two women in swimsuits enjoying the sun on the roof of a building in London, the capital of England and the United Kingdom, in 1953. Young athletes of the former Soviet Union posing for a photograph in 1924. A Japanese woman carrying her children in a bucket on her head in Japan in the 1900s. A sergeant instructing civilian women of the Defense Corps on the use of firearms during the Battle of Britain in England during World War II. In 1940, an extremely sad scene depicts a family of Argentine natives who, in 1889, were captured and forced to embark for Europe, where they faced the cruel fate of being exhibited as if they were animals in a human zoo. At the beginning of the 20th century, we witness a deeply regrettable scene depicting Australian Aborigines confined and subjugated as the gold rush spread through northern Western Australia. These individuals, who are the legitimate original inhabitants of Australia, had already occupied this land for tens of thousands of years, long before the arrival of European colonizers. A man being fined for wearing swimsuits considered indecent for the time on a beach in the Netherlands in the year 1931. In the early 20th century, society was highly sensitive to the issue of swimsuits, and it was common to fine for excessively revealing swimsuits. Both women and men could be fined, with their swimsuits often measured with a tape measure to check compliance with prevailing standards. A woman crossing a ruined street in the capital of Germany during the Battle of Berlin in May 1945. The Battle of Berlin was the final confrontation on the European warfront at the end of World War II. In this battle, millions of Soviet soldiers carried out the attack on the city, completely destroying it. A group of American girls enthusiastically participate in a high-speed spaghetti eating contest, where the goal is to devour the spaghetti without using hands, a popular competition in the 1940s in the United States. This country has a deep-rooted tradition in eating competitions. A couple selling strawberries on the streets of London, the capital of England, in 1877. Dorothy Counts, the first black student to attend an all-white school in the United States, is shown in this photo being taunted and ridiculed by her white male classmates. Dorothy was 15 years old when she became the first black girl at the high school in Charlotte in the southern U.S. It was September 4th, 1957, and the city was attempting racial integration. For 5 days, she endured stones, spit, and insults. This harrowing ordeal shaped the course of her life, inspiring her to passionately dedicate herself to education and transforming her into one of the most iconic images of the Black civil rights struggle in the United States. A peculiar New Year's ritual in Mexico during the period of Porfirio Diaz, involving women kneeling before their husbands to ask for forgiveness for the mistakes and annoyances caused to them throughout the year, around 1900. This is one of the most iconic moments in the history of sports and 20th century society. American athlete Jesse Owens on the Olympic podium after winning the gold medal in the long jump at the 1936 Summer Olympics held in Berlin. This event is historic not only for the sporting triumph, but also for the historical and political context. Berlin at the time was the capital of Nazi Germany, a regime that promoted racist and supremacist policies. Owens, a black athlete, challenged these ideologies by winning 4 gold medals during the Games, demonstrating the fallacy of the Aryan supremacy theory promoted by the Nazis. His success was a powerful response to racism and an affirmation of civil rights and human dignity.